Hi, welcome back to another episode of Anyone Can Paint. I think this is going to be the final episode on the Fort Gratiot Lighthouse. We just have some detailing we got to do. We need to put some windows in on the lighthouse. We got to put highlights in our weeds and grasses that we have here. And then we also need to distress the lighthouse itself a little bit. In real life, a lot of the paint's chipping off that. We kind of had a debate about this, whether we should paint it like it was fresh and clean, but we decided we should do it like we see it. So we're going to start with the nylon brush. This is about like a 1/2 inch. And I'm going to go back to that dark color that we had. Remember, this is just a mixture of some blue and some brown. Excuse me, I can get some water. And again, this is just to be a dark color. Blend it pretty well. And right about there is where this window is. And then there's also another one that's right about here. Now, if we have time, I'll put some highlights around it so it looks like it's really standing out a bit. Up here at the top, there's like a weather station kind of thing. There's some railings. I'll put this in just real quick. It kind of comes off this top area. And because this brush keeps a nice chiseled edge, I think I'm just going to stay with this brush. Maybe I'm going to switch to the smaller one. Same color, dark. I just switched to that little 1/4 inch one. And I think I'm going to finish that up with my liner brush. Kind of define those edges out a little bit better. And again, remember the whole thing to this is just to kind of get a feel for what's out here. Alrighty, let's go ahead and clean those out. Then we're going to go down and put the highlights in our weeds and grasses. We're going to use our fan brush for that. That's what we use to create those little guys. Make sure, again, it's wet. Towel dry that baby off. We're going to get into some yellow. And maybe a small touch of green. We'll see what that color does. Remember, just like everything else we ever highlight, don't cover up all of your dark. It's really important to kind of make it look like it's got some thickness to it, some depth. And I'm just pushing in with the brush and bending it up a little bit. Don't worry about the bottom edge of this. We'll adjust all of those with some more highlights from the sand, but we need to get these highlights in the grasses in first. Just going to reload. I'll be right back. And if you have small areas, just kind of, because of the shape of the fan brush, kind of is like that. If you go in real gentle, you can just catch the middle part of the bristles if you need to get into some really tight areas. But see how I'm leaving some darks? That's so you can kind of get that feel like there's some depth within those. If you cover the whole thing, then you're just going to end up with some light blob colors, and it's got no definition to it. So it's really important that you don't cover up all the dark. I tell you that all the time, and I tell that in all my classes all the time. They're probably tired of me saying it, but it's just so important. Kind of get that up against that pine tree. While you've got that color, if you want to, you can go back and redefine a little bit. If you need to brighten up your tree, just put a little bit, don't do a lot, because remember, you want that to sit back a little bit from this so you can see the depth here. If you make that really light, then it's going to kind of get confused with this. Go ahead and clean that out. Now I'm going to go back to my script brush, and I'm going to put a little bit of definition around those windows so there's a little bit of a trim work that's there. And this will kind of help make those windows kind of step out a little bit. I'm going to make this a grayish color, and I just had more of that dark that we had used originally and just added some white to it. And I'm going to put this on the bottom edge and along this side here. I need to make that a little bit brighter. There. I remember to leave time so we can get this lighthouse kind of distressed with the paint coming off of it. It's amazing, since we kind of got involved with this lighthouse, how many lighthouses are actually in the same kind of condition where they need to have some refurbishing done to them. And there's organizations all across Michigan that are working pretty hard to see that that's done. But because of the way the economy is, a lot of cities, that's not really the main priority to a city, which is certainly understandable. But if you'd ever like to get involved with these, I mean, there's organizations for almost every lighthouse there is, and they would sure appreciate your help, I'm going to imagine. All right, let's clean that out. Before I forget, we need to do a little bit to the shadow side of our lighthouse. In fact, I'm going to use my number 3 flat brush. This is going to be some white, a little bit of blue, and a touch of brown. Remember, this color needs to be darker because it's in the shadows. And I'm actually going to turn my canvas this way. Now here's where you can use your finger and kind of help to smudge this. Yeah, that's a good color. And just kind of work this color down, or I guess in real life it'd be across, just into that white a little bit, and then lighten the pressure up, and then smudge that with your finger. Again, we're going to go right down the sideline to that, bring this out a little bit, and smudge it with your finger. Secret is to working it into the white a little bit. All right, let me get this, forgot this part up here. Turn that around. I'm going to clean the brush real quick, and I'm going to go through and just kind of soften this up a little bit more. There. All right. To distress this up, I'm going to use my number 1 flat bristle brush. And this is a really burgundy type of color that's in there. So this is going to be some burnt sienna, a little bit of red, and then you want to add a little blue to this. Now the burnt sienna is in there to stop this from going purple. Now if you continue to keep adding blue to it, it'll eventually get to a purple color. Lots of boats. And in fact, while I'm mixing this color up, why don't we stop and take a little break, and we'll make our last visit with Lighthouse Bob, and he can tell you what the future is for this that he hopes. So enjoy it. All right, Bob. We've talked about the history of it. We've talked about the buildings and the duties of the lighthouse keeper and those things. And I guess we've gone from the beginning, and let's talk about where we are in recent history. Right now, the thing is kind of in limbo a little bit in some different directions. Where do you see, or where do you envision if they came to you and said, Bob, it's up to you. What do you want to have done with the lighthouse? kind of give us your vision of where you would like to see the lighthouse go in the, from today and maybe on into the near future.
Okay, we had great plans. The Coast Guard declared this lighthouse excess in 2004, and it was at that point turned over to the GSA to dispose of. And in order to follow their normal policy, I understand that for a certain period of time, it was offered up to any federal agency that might want it, National Park Service or something like that. Apparently nobody wanted it. Well, at the second phase, it then is offered up to a municipality or a county and so forth. And at that point, the city, actually, we had our application in and ready the day they declared it excess.
So you could be first in line?
Yeah. And we thought everything was fine. We had a few environmental problems and that. And finally, the deed came through, but there was a lot of restrictions on the deed that the city didn't want to accept. And of course, in the meantime, the city's had a few financial problems. So right now, we don't know. What we had planned on doing was the duplex was going to be pretty much one end restored to what it had been when the keeper lived in there. The balance was going to be museum. The small home, which is on the other end of the duplex, was built in 1931, and that was built for the commanding officer of the life-saving service. That we thought was quite suitable to be a gift shop. The Foghorn building was going to be a theater. We planned we would like to put cameras up in the tower. It's impossible for that to be wheelchair accessible.
Right.
But if you had cameras stationed throughout the tower, you could go in the Foghorn building here with a monitor and watch your family go up there and that.
Oh,
and the Foghorn building is, of course, ground level, so there's no problem with wheelchairs or anything else. The old Coast Guard station, which was part of the deal, was again going to be museum. And the garage out there, the big 4-car garage, was going to be a workshop and what have you, storage. And the small garage here and on the 3-car garage that's built right there by the duplex, originally they wanted to tear that down because it didn't match the era that they were in.
Oh,
I said, no, that's going to be our public restrooms because it's only 15 feet from water and 30 feet from the sewer.
Oh, yeah.
And they could just make that into handicaps and the whole thing.
Right.
So that was pretty much decided. So we had it pretty well worked out what we wanted to do, what we would like to do with it. But now I understand that we've gone through a new regime and there's going to be some changes. But I don't know what it is.
Right. But in a perfect world, that's what it would end up being, right?
Yeah.
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 All right. Well, Bob, thank you so much for your time. We met you, obviously, before we came out here today. And Mike and I, when we left after we had met you, there was no question that we detected this passion that you have for this lighthouse.
I love it.
And it comes out. And we're just so thankful that you took the time to meet us a couple different times and to come down and film this part today. I don't think anybody could tell the story of that lighthouse with more enthusiasm and passion and knowledge than you. When I first contacted the museum about doing this project, he says, you've got to get a hold of Bob Hanford because he is Mr. Fort Gratiot Lighthouse, that if something happened at that lighthouse that he doesn't know about, it's probably a rumor. It didn't happen. So thank you again for taking out the time to meet with us, and it's been a pleasure to meet you and to work with you on this project. So thanks so much.
You're welcome. Glad to do it.
Welcome back. I hope you really enjoyed those segments with Lighthouse Bob. Man's got a ton of knowledge on this. Been doing it for a long time and giving tours. What I've done is I've got that, I got to talk a little loud because there's a lot of boats. This is that burgundy color, which is some burnt sienna, a little bit of red, and a touch of blue. Now what you got to do here is, because this is distressed and it's not in a pattern, it's just haphazard, is that you don't want to get into a pattern. What you want to do is you're going to keep your brush moving fairly quick, because if you go slow, what happens is you say, okay, I'll put one here, I'll put one there, I'll put one there, and all your strokes start looking the same, and then you start getting into some spacing issues, and they're all spaced out evenly. So you want this to be haphazard like it naturally is. It just kind of just is flaking off. I'm going to make that a little darker. I'm going to add a little bit more blue to this. There. That's better. And you can hit it hard sometimes. Sometimes you can hit it light. You can smudge it if you like to sometimes. But this is going to be all the way around this, just not on the sunlit side. And this is going to be a little time consuming because there's quite a bit of this. But just vary the strokes, vary the pressure that you're using. Some are faint, some are pretty good size because there's like large sections of that paint falling off. I'm just going to reload, I'll be right back. Bob was telling us that when they used to paint this in the old days, they used to use a whitewash, and that didn't adhere to the bricks very well. I'm just going to reload. I'm going to put a little bit more burnt sand into this color, a little bit more red. Yeah, that's a good color. But just kind of change the pressure that you're using. Sometimes hit it really light, sometimes you can hit it a little darker. And it seems like it starts to go up here and then it doesn't do it so much. It's almost like it was a different kind of paint. And then up in this section here it does a little bit more too. So again, you just kind of give a suggestion. But this actually goes, it affects us all the way around, even the sides that we can't even see. It's like that. So it's just not because this is on the north side or the east side. I did a version of this painting in my studio, and when I got to this part, I didn't have as much on this as I am now. And it was funny because I mentioned earlier that I had taken some photographs, and I went back to look at those, and it was just amazing how much more I had to add to it. All right, let's go ahead and clean that brush out. I think while I've got this brush, I'm going to add a little bit of white to that same color, which is basically what we did to that roof. And I'm going to put a little bit of light into this, a little bit, just to kind of break up the roof line a little bit. And again, you can put that in, you can smudge it a little bit. Again, you don't have to cover up this whole thing. You're just kind of suggest some texture, maybe the shingles or whatever. But as you apply this, make sure you're following the angle of the roof. You don't want to put those on that way because you're going against the grain. You got to come on that same angle to look right. Yeah, let's throw a little bit on this doghouse roof. And we'll clean that out. I think what I'm going to do next, since we got a couple more minutes, is I'm going to go back to my script brush and I'm going to kind of reshape some of these windows since we've got a chance to do that. I'm going to use a script liner brush, some blue, a little bit of brown. And again, it gets that really dark color. Now, I haven't talked about this in a while, but once in a while I'll get an email or a phone call about, why do you mix that? Why don't you just use black out of the tube? Well, what happens is that when you use black out of the tube, you can make the color black or a really dark color that looks like black a number of different ways, using different color combinations. The problem that I find is that when you buy black out of a tube, the manufacturer of that particular brand of paint determines what colors go into that black. And what happens very, very often is that the colors that they use to make that black aren't necessarily in the colors that you use to paint with. So that black stands out just like it's a foreign color almost. It just doesn't even go with anything. So what I like to do is, because blues and browns are in a lot of paintings, they're just natural earth tone colors and things, I like to mix my own black because I can control how dark it goes. And plus, there's it's kind of like a color harmony. It kind of goes with the painting because you've used those colors in other spots. Again, all I'm doing is just kind of darkening up and maybe reshaping some of these windows a little bit. Notice how I'm holding my hand way up on the front end of the bristle. That's how you get a lot of detail and you can control it. Nice thing about my liner brush is that you hold it way back, you can get a little bit more freedom. But right now I want to make sure that I'm getting fairly precise strokes. While I've got that color and I've got this, let's put in some suggestions of some birds. Now the thing with birds, if you just change the direction and the size, you'll get a sense of some that are close up and further away. So you can see, like right here, I'll put one here. See how that one looks like it's further back than that one because it's so much darker and it's so much larger? But just kind of vary the sizes and the shapes and the angle. Don't smudge it with your finger. And you can put as many or as few, but these birds always tend to look good when you have a lake scene, ocean scene, something like that, because they're just a very natural part of nature there. And again, just kind of suggest someone that are really small way back. That again kind of helps you get that little sense of, well, since that's smudged, I might as well make him bigger, of some distance in your painting. And then on those larger ones, if you'd like to, you can get a little bit of white. I think we got a couple seconds left. We can get this in. Just get white on your brush. Maybe not very many seconds. Nice, you know, it's nice if this is dry when you do this, but you can kind of hit some of these with a little bit of white. That'll put a little bit of highlight on them. And obviously you just want to do this to the larger ones, because the larger ones is where you would see this. And there's just a couple cross pieces here. Put those in. And this is about as far as we're going to get on this. I hope you enjoyed this kind of getting out in nature, and it's a little bit different than doing it in the studio. We had a blast. We'd like to thank the Port Huron Museum for all their cooperation and the time they spent with us. They were just fantastic people. If you get a chance, come visit all their exhibits they have. You can do this, I promise you. Anyone can paint.